Okay, we are now live. You are ready to go.
All right. Before we begin, should we just wait 1 or 2 minutes that people start streaming in and stuff? Are we able to check the attendance? Not attendance, but the number of people who are here at the moment.
We have one participant right now. We have one.
Is it streaming? Because I don't see it on my end.
Yep, it's streaming. I can see it on my Facebook page, no?
Okay. Yeah. All right, then I would think we should just begin and let's not delay more. All right. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us here today for the very first episode of our video series, What's Law Got to Do with It? And today we have with us an amazing guest speaker from Brunei, and we'll be having a discussion on Brunei's local laws just ahead of ALSA Conference Brunei 2024. So for those of you watching who will be attending the conference in person, I hope that this will be an informative session for you. And even for those of you who won't be attending the conference in person, I'm sure that this will be a very useful information session, especially if you plan to visit Brunei in the future. So for me personally, I will be heading to the conference very soon. So I'm really looking forward to this interview. And I think the organizing committee of AC Brunei has really done a very good job in setting everything up. So for now, I will pass the time on to the chairperson of the organizing committee and the president of ALSA Brunei, Shafia, to share a little bit more about the upcoming conference.
Thank you, Nicole. I would like to firstly check if I am audible and clear. Okay. Thank you so much, Nicole, for the kind introductory. I would like to wish a very good afternoon to everyone, especially to our respected guests today, Ms. Aziimah, who is also one of our tiered sponsors for the ALSA Conference Brunei 2024, the respected international board members, and of course our members of the national chapter who are watching the live today. It's with great excitement and anticipation that we gather here today to kick off the promotion of the ALSA Conference Brunei 2024 through the ALSA International Board's great initiative, which is this webinar regarding What's Law Got to Do with It, episode 1, featuring one of the most respected lawyers in Brunei. We would like to express our greatest and utmost gratitude for the hard workings of the IBs in hosting this event in order to get a lot of viewers and a lot of anticipated participants to join the conference. So maybe to help out everyone and to give a bit of a brief introduction for what you can expect for the ALSA Conference Brunei 2024 is that this conference holds the promise of being a pivotal moment in the legal landscape. So bringing together legal minds and diverse perspectives, especially our esteemed speakers and a platform serve as a platform for robust discussions. So as we embark on this journey, we are going to delve into the main theme of the ALSA Conference Brunei, which is embracing the diversity of Asia, law, culture, and identity, a theme that reflects very closely to the objectives or the idea of ALSA Brunei as a whole. So I believe that by promoting this theme, we can gather legal knowledge and legal insights from all of our respected speakers, respected sponsors, and through this initiative also we can gather legal minds and participate in 4 main activities of the ALSA Conference Brunei 2024, which is firstly the plenary speaker session that will be given by the Attorney General of Brunei Darussalam. And then we also have the panel speaker sessions, which we have already invited prominent guest speakers from two very prominent law firms. And we also have the alumni sharing session, and lastly, also the ALSA Open Thought session. So I believe today, Madam Aziimah will share her perspective and her great knowledge to prepare everyone for what you may expect when you come to Brunei Darussalam. And to make it short and simple, maybe if you're curious, you can hit us up through our social media platforms, which is ALSA Brunei Instagram page and also ALSA Conference Instagram page. If you're also more curious, you can also go to our website, which is alsabrunei.org. And yeah, I believe today's session would really be beneficial for everyone, and hope you will enjoy today's webinar with Miss Aziimah. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Right, thank you so much, Shafia. So now we can move on to the interview segment that we have for today. And I would also first like to introduce our esteemed speaker, Miss Aziimah Hambali, who is partner at Hasna Hassan and Associates. And on top of heading the civil department at her firm, she is also an accredited mediator with the Singapore Mediation Center, and she is legal secretary for the Young Entrepreneurs Association of Brunei. So we are very glad and honored to have such a respected and accomplished lawyer here with us today. And we're very grateful that she has lent us her time to take part in this webinar series. And for today as well, our moderator,
I just wanted to thank you for the introduction.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And I would also like to introduce our Director of Transcription and Communication, who will be moderating today's session, who will be doing the interview. Yeah. So after the actual interview, we'll also have some time for questions from the audience as well. So anybody watching, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to comment on the live, and we will, note that at the end of the session as well. All right. So Farah and Aziimah, over to you.
Thank you, Nicole. Without further ado, I will dive into the questions. Before we get into the serious questions, I would like to start with Ms. Aziimah. Can you explain us briefly about the legal system of Brunei and some of the key features, some important aspects, and what we can look forward to in general when it comes to the legal system of Brunei?
Okay, hi. First of all, I'd like to thank ALSA for having me on your first ever webinar series. I'm very delighted to be here and to meeting future lawyers, new legal professionals. It's amazing to see the work that you've put in respect of ALSA. So thank you for having me today. So the crux of Brunei's judicial system is that we are a dual legal system, and that means that we have the civil law, which is based on British common law, operating in parallel with Islamic Sharia law, which is essentially codified Islamic teachings from the Quran and Hadith, which come under the umbrella term of Hukum Shara. So with a dual legal system, the civil courts and the Sharia courts have separate jurisdictions that are governed by the relevant acts. So this means that there won't be any, when there are issues on jurisdiction, they can refer to the acts to see whether they have the actual jurisdiction to deal with those legal issues. But essentially, the baseline is that Sharia law would apply to Muslims, generally, save for certain caveats, and civil law will run as per the jurisdiction that they have.
Right. Thank you for that brief introduction, Ms. Aziimah. I will move on to the next question. So there is this, when we look up Brunei, we know that the Sharia law prevails and it's a Muslim majority country. So things like alcohol is a major topic. So as tourists and visitors are trying to visit Brunei, and especially for the ACA conference, I would also like to generally mention that what are the legal limits and where can we find these provisions under Brunei law when it comes to bringing in alcohol, consumption of alcohol, or possession of alcohol substances?
Okay, So before we get to the prescribed limits, I just want to do a bit of history on why there is a ban on the sale and consumption of alcohol. It's not a general ban per se when we talk about consumption, because consumption, when it relates to non-Muslim, is allowed in private residence. So private consumption for non-Muslims is not illegal. So Brunei has not always been a dry country. It only became dry in 1991, and it was a decision that was largely motivated by the Sultan's desire to ensure that the government continues to emulate the teachings of the Quran. As you know, Brunei's official religion is Islam, and we have always been a Nagara zikr, that's what they call it, which means that our daily life is based on the teachings of Islam. And even before we were under the British protectorate, Brunei's laws had always been based on Islam and customary laws, so hukum kanun. Now, the decision to ban alcohol seemed only logical because of our official religion being Islam. And as we all know, or maybe some don't know, alcohol is impermissible in Islam. It's haram. And the basis is that the negative effects of alcohol and the harmfulness of it towards the mental and physical health is detrimental to not only the person, but also can be detrimental to the community as a whole. So that's the reasoning behind why alcohol is not permissible in Islam and therefore has been codified to be illegal in Brunei. So sale and consumption. Now, when you're talking about the permitted limits, I believe that, like you said, when you Google it, you can find the information readily available on several websites. But I believe the prescribed limits is 2 bottles of liquor, approximately 2 liters, and 12 cans of beer measuring 330 milliliters per can. This law can be found in the Customs Import Duty Order 2007. It's in Section 9 under the Part B. So it must be declared upon arrival, and failure to declare would result in those goods being seized and possibility of a fine, imprisonment, or both. So those are the punishments for failure to declare or bringing in more than the prescribed limit. When you're talking about the non-consumption, the consumption of alcohol, there is an absolute restriction on Muslims, whether you're local or not local. But for non-Muslims, there's a limitation on consumption, which is it cannot be consumed in public places, which means that it can only be consumed in private places. And you can find the laws governing this in Section 104, subsection 5 of the Sharia Penal Code Order. I'll just read out the law for you. Any non-Muslim who drinks liquor or any intoxicating drink in public place is guilty of an offense and shall be liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding $8,000, imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years, or both. So that's the law governing non-Muslims' consumption of alcohol.
Thank you, Aziimah, for that descriptive answer on how and what are the laws and what are the restrictions and what punishments we would get. But just to be clear on it, so it exclusively applies to Muslims, that they cannot do it, they have no business with alcohol whatsoever.
Yes,
But non-Muslims, you have to be very private about the consumption and holding liquor.
yes, that's correct.
Right. Moving on to the next question. Apart from alcohol, there is also smoking and vaping involved as well. So, Ms. Aziimah, can you briefly tell us how about smoking? What sort of restrictions and laws apply to people who smoke, to people who have cigarettes in their hand, and positions of vaping, and how it differentiates? Is smoking only is illegal, or does vaping come into that as well?
I just have to clarify for vaping, I'm not so clear on the laws, but for smoking, so smoking has the same, we call it a religious ruling. It's called fatwa. So the fatwa also stems from the ban of alcohol. There's no specific law found in the Quran that smoking is haram or impermissible. But because smoking has an adverse effect on the health, and we are not allowed to harm ourselves physically or internally, so they replicate the ruling. And I can't remember the exact date, but the state mufti came out with a ruling to say that smoking is, by following the ruling on alcohol, is illegal or haram, impermissible. And because of that, the laws on sale of cigarette, the imports of cigarettes, it's all very much controlled. And even in Brunei, most places ban smoking. So you have to be mindful when you're visiting Brunei to make sure that you check the signs on the buildings. And there's also like perimeters of the building where smoking is not allowed. And I think that generally you won't find cigarettes being sold in the market.
So it is not per se illegal, but does it apply to only Muslims or non-Muslims? How does it differentiate?
It applies to everyone.
It applies to everyone.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to be really mindful in Brunei when it comes to possession of cigarettes and smoking.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Aziimah. I will move on to the next question. That is, usually many countries, some neighboring countries, they all have the Sharia law. So, but could you tell us more about the history and role of Sharia law within the Brunei legal system, considering that how laws are structured? Now, when it comes to Sharia law, there are some certain people consider it inhuman punishments, and I would like to know if these punishments are exclusively enforced. These acts like stoning, do they actually happen? So that people can get a clear view of how Sharia law exerts itself into the Brunei legal system.
Okay, so I think when you're talking about the inhumane punishments, you're talking about the Sharia criminal law. So in 2013, it was the Sharia Penal Code order was enacted. And that is mainly, it's mainly an act to govern Sharia crimes. The thing is, we know that it garnered international attention and backlash with criticism of it being pernicious and unethical. But I think that stems from a misconception and distorted understanding of what Sharia law is and how it is implemented. As with all judicial systems, the foundation of Sharia law, even more so as it's backed by Islamic teachings, it's based on fairness and effectiveness. There's still a presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And given the heavy punishments that can be prescribed for certain offenses, and I think you're talking about hudud and qisas, there is a very high evidentiary threshold, which brings the beyond reasonable doubt standard that we have in the civil criminal jurisdictions to a different magnitude. It's very much difficult to prove to get to that level of punishment to be executed. So to answer your question, there is no known execution or handing down of certain punishments, such as stoning. Such as stoning, no.
Yeah, something caning and stoning as well, right?
So flogging is still in both of our legal systems. In the civil system, in the civil law jurisdictions, caning is also a prescribed punishment, prescribed sentence, and that is still being carried out. So to say that it's inhumane under the purview of a Sharia jurisdiction would be unfair to say from my perspective, because in parallel, that's also happening in our civil law jurisdictions. Those are punishments that are being prescribed in these civil law jurisdictions. And if you look at the history, our Brunei Penal Code is actually based on the Indian Penal Code. So I think you can also look at maybe it's influenced by our customary laws and traditions that we still have caning. But the one thing I can confidently say is that for the death penalty, it has not been exercised here for the longest time.
So to be clear, the capital punishment is not enforced in the Brunei legal system.
The capital punishment, we have capital punishment, and it does get handed down, but it's not been executed fully to the extent of honoring the capital punishment.
It is currently not active, but it's present.
Yes, correct.
Right. Thank you for clearing that out, Ms. Aziimah. So also, it's just a follow-up question for what I was asking before. Can you tell us about the considerations on how the actual sentencing framework is?
In the Sharia jurisdiction or the civil jurisdiction?
The Sharia jurisdiction.
Okay, so I'm not a qualified Sharia lawyer, but I do work in a Sharia firm. So like our dual legal system, the firm that I am with, we offer both services in the civil jurisdiction and the Sharia jurisdiction. When it comes to sentencing, so it's very broad because there's a number of offenses, and similarly in the criminal jurisdiction, offenses are categorized to severe offenses and not so severe offenses. So I think that when you're looking at the sentence in the sentencing procedure, I honestly cannot comment much on it. But again, when you're talking about what most people want to know is for hudud punishments, how do you actually carry out the hudud punishments? Well, you have to look at what is required in terms of evidence for them to carry out the hudud punishments. And that is most usually 4 male witnesses who are adil, which is fair. And at the time of, let's just say, committing zina, which is adultery, it would be really difficult to prove that in order to have a prescribed sentence of hudud. So usually it would be a lower sentence, and it is very much difficult for courts to hand down a sentence of hudud.
So since we are on the very same topic on the Sharia law, currently in Brunei, what are the laws, what are the punishments, or what are the crimes that are actually being punished for using Sharia law?
The ones that I'm familiar with is usually khalwat. So khalwat is being in close proximity with a woman who is not your betrothed. So you have no familial relationship with that woman, and you are in a closed area. To the extent of my knowledge, you're in a closed area. And because usually it's difficult to prove adultery, which is a higher charge, then they would usually just charge you for khalwat. And that's usually a fine and imprisonment, or both, or either.
Right. So does this apply to non-Muslims as well? Because
it only applies to non-Muslims if you are involved with a Muslim.
Right. So I'll just get an example since our AC is approaching. So imagine for the conference now we are having a lot of law students who are coming in. So some may have be in a relationship with a heterosexual relationship where they're not married yet. So if they are sharing the same hotel room, as an example, does the law apply to them?
Would
If they're not
apply.
Muslim,
Well, from a strict reading, again, I am not a Sharia practitioner, so I can't really comment further. But from a reading of the law, it would apply. It would seem to apply.
so it's not. I have heard that it's something that's frowned upon, but it would it strictly apply to those who practice it? If they get, should they be very aware of it? Does the hotel let them know, or how could they focus on that?
I think it would be best to avoid it if possible,
Mhm.
because I don't think that hotel rooms would check, the hotels would check, but these are the laws that are in place, and we've seen it apply to locals, but have yet to see it on a non-local basis. But these are the laws that we have.
Right. Also, just a follow-up question to that, is free mixing allowed in Brunei?
Yes.
Yes,
So
it
you
is
would
allowed.
see that free mixing is allowed in Brunei. You are able to have social activities with both male and female. It's not restricted. There's
Right.
no strict segregation of some sort. Yeah.
Right. We have come to the end of all our questions. Aziimah, thank you so much for explaining us about the Brunei legal system and what are the things we should be aware of, what rules and laws are in place, and as visitors, what we should know, and as the general public, what we should know about Brunei. And it was very insightful. We learned so many things, and now we know we kind of have an idea about how Brunei works when it comes to law. Next, we have the Q&A session. So we can move on to that. We can ask the audience. They can ask questions, and Ms. Aziimah will answer. Thank you once again, Ms. Aziimah, for
Thank
answering
you
all
so
of.
much for having me.
We can move on to the Q&A session.
Right. So I do believe that it might take a while for the live questions to come in, but I do know that one of our directors also does have a question for you, Aziimah. So perhaps Joyce, you can go ahead.
Hi, Madam Aziimah. So I get some questions from the delegates from Indonesia also. You say that the smoking is kind of restricted, right, in Brunei. What about the other smoking devices like the electronic vape and all the pods? Is it illegal also, or is it illegal, or it's just restricted as like smoking there?
I know that there's a ban on the sale of e-cigarettes and vapes. You won't find it in the market here, and I think that when you're bringing it in, I think there's also a prescribed limit, and you have to declare it at customs, I believe. But in terms of smoking, smoking the e-cigarettes, I am not fully aware of any restrictions, save for where the building itself is restricted. There's a sign banning any smoking. It would apply to e-cigarettes and vaping as well.
Thank you so much, Aziimah, for answering my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I actually do also have a little bit of a question for you. Because I am from Singapore, right? And Singapore does have very good like relations with Brunei, but unfortunately, I think not a lot of people really have a lot of exposure of what it's like there and know what the legal system is like. So I personally don't really know that much about Sharia law as well. So this is like one of the first few times that I'm, hearing more about it and learning about it. So I was also curious to know, because I think what we've discussed here is a lot about criminal laws, I suppose. So, based on your experience, how would you say that, Sharia law sort of interacts with maybe other areas of law? Because in Singapore, I think we only have it for mostly family law. So it's, a bit
Correct.
different. It's a bit of a different experience for us here.
So for the longest time, actually, Sharia law only applied to Islamic family law and the distribution determination of the Muslim's estate. so probate and administration. It was only in through the religious Qadi councils, there's certain Sharia acts that were criminalized, but not on the full scale. Not on a full scale compared to when we have the Sharia Penal Code order now. So Islamic Family Law Act, when it involves Muslims, it will be wholly, totally the jurisdiction of the Sharia courts. So divorce matters, custody matters, any matters to do with your wealth when you die as a Muslim, that will be the Sharia jurisdiction in terms of the civil areas of law. And I think when you talk about wealth management as well, so in the civil jurisdictions, you have a will. In the Islamic jurisdiction, you have the wasiat. So anything to do with wasiat and hibah, which is a deed of gift under the Islamic principles, that would be also governed by the Sharia jurisdiction. I think the advantage that we have here being a dual law firm is that when it involves a Muslim's deceased estate, we have let's say, one-stop shop. So I am very much exposed to how my Sharia team deal with the Islamic applications for determination and distribution of Islamic wealth before moving on to the probate and administration works, which are under the civil jurisdiction.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I see that sort of benefit because for us it's totally separate. So that's, don't have a lot of exposure. But yeah, okay, thank you for answering my question. And for now, I think Zinat also had some questions for you, so I'll let her take over from here.
Thank you, Nicole. Hi, Ms. Aziimah. I just want to ask now, catering to the ALSA conference, since delegates will be coming to our country, the legal system in Brunei, how will it differentiate in applying to locals and foreigners coming into our country? That is one question. And the follow-up question is, you mentioned that foreigners can bring in alcohol in limited quantities. Can this alcohol be carried while they're traveling in their bag, or is it they have to consume it within a hotel room and enclosed space?
Thank you for the questions. To answer your first question, the laws will make no differentiation. As with us, if we're in Sri Lanka, if we're in Singapore, if we're in Malaysia, Indonesia, we have to respect the laws that they have there because the law, nobody is above the law. So that rule applies here as well. To answer your second question, the prohibition is only on consumption of alcohol in public places. So to just make sure that they're not drinking or consuming the intoxicating drinks in public, then it should be fine. But to err on the side of caution, probably have the approved declaration form just on you at all times, just to cover yourself further. I'd also like to notify you. I don't know if ALSA Brunei has notified you. You can notify your delegates as well. Brunei has a official close on business on Fridays between 12 to 2 p.m. Okay, so I think that's one thing that your delegates should be wary of, because I know you'll be here over the weekend. And that's also, it has religious connotations to that as well.
Yes, actually, I told the organizing committee to sort of draft a document with basic information that the delegates would like to know. And apart from that, do you think any other laws that the delegates need to be aware of? Because conference also not only involves academic sessions, but also involves a trip around the country as well to just do sightseeing. So is there any other laws that the delegates need to be aware of that we haven't emphasized on?
I think the one thing that's worth mentioning is censorship. So as you know, Brunei, we don't have freedom of speech. And I think that your delegates should refrain from making any, just respect the customs and the traditions in Brunei, as well as the laws, and keep any comments that could potentially be criticisms of the government, not be made. Yeah. And I think in terms of any other laws that you should be aware of, there's nothing that comes to mind at the moment, but it's just you're in somebody's country, you should be just respectful.
On the note of freedom of expression and freedom of speech, rather, some countries don't allow photography of the general public. So is there a limitation? Because sometimes the delegates would like to take pictures of the tourists and the sightseeing. So is there a limitation where
I don't believe there's any restrictions, no. But if in doubt, it's best to ask if they consent.
Okay. Yeah, that's all from me, Nicole. Back to you.
Right, thanks, Zina. Farah, you had a question, was it?
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask if what are the rules in place when in relation to gambling in Brunei? Is it how far is it like allowed, or is it
Gambling
how
is not allowed in Brunei. So we
in,
have laws under our civil jurisdiction. So there's a restriction on common gaming houses, which is essentially areas that allow for gambling on a large scale. But I mean, that's to the extent that the law is involved. Yeah.
right? Thank you.
Okay, so this has been mostly very IB focused, but let me just look at the Facebook live comments really quickly. So so Pear has also noted that because Pear is from Thailand, so she in her country Buddhism is also heavily influenced on their legal text. So they do have some restrictions on alcohol as well. So I think interesting to know. Maybe we'll have a webinar series on Thailand as well in the future. And a few comments. Peng is also asking in the chat, so Madam Aziimah, in your experience in practicing law in Brunei, do you see any potential or actual conflicts or inconsistencies between the Sharia and civil laws in Brunei?
Yes, we have. So especially when it involves the estate of a deceased and it involves administration work, there's usually a lot of conflict there in terms of who has jurisdiction. Also in protective orders for children or victims of domestic violence, there's also a jurisdictional issue between the juvenile courts and the Sharia courts. And just to share, I recently attended to a matter where this issue did come up in the juvenile courts regarding a protective order. But again, when it involves a Muslim, it should be in the Sharia courts, because in the Islamic Family Law Act, there is a provision for protective order, similarly to the juvenile courts. So there is conflict, but having good lawyers help to point out and argue on points of jurisdiction that actually helps. And also having a clear understanding as to what matters would fall under which jurisdiction would really help.
Right, so that's really interesting, I think. And you did also mention that like there were some recent legal reforms, right, with regards to Sharia law. So I also do imagine that it's a period of time now where maybe it's a transition, or do you not find that, or do you find that the laws have already sort of maybe been practiced or been in place, so there's not much of a paradigm shift in that sense?
I don't feel that it was a big shift, honestly. Because if you look at our history again, and I can't stress this enough, if you read the books, if you read articles on Brunei, we have always been brought up on Islamic teachings and values, and our laws are formulated from that. So to say that going back and looking at the backlash that we received on a wide scale in 2013, it didn't really impact us that much because we knew what was happening here. And I think that when you get past that distorted view and when you get past that fixed conception as to what Sharia law is, you'll actually understand that the implementation is very much so regulated. And you'll see yourself when you come to Brunei. It's not is what the articles talk about. And I don't know, the recent royal wedding was broadcasted live everywhere, and you could see that it's not as secular as the media made it out to be when the enactment of the Sharia Penal Code order was made in 2013.
I see. Okay, I think a lot of our delegates definitely will be able to sort of maybe experience Brunei for the first time. So really looking forward to that. I think at the moment, if there aren't any other questions coming on the live chat, and I think if the IB also don't have, if all's good with the international board, then I think this is a good time for us to maybe conclude today's session. And I would also just like to thank Madam Aziimah again. Thank you so much for taking the time to come down and speak with us today. We are also looking forward to seeing you at the ALSA conference this weekend. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much as well for having me. And I am as excited to meet all of you at the conference.
Right. So yeah, on behalf of the entire international board, we are very grateful for you here, and we're also very grateful for everyone who has joined and tuned in to this session. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to future episodes as well. Before we all leave, should we perhaps maybe take a quick photo together?
Sure.
Right,
Okay.
so okay.
I'm going to stop the live stream now, if that's okay.